Welcome to today's webinar with Yao from Bubble, who's going to be conducting an interactive session with us around how to build an MVP with no code. Before we get started, I'd love to just review with everyone about Passport. So Passport's the world's most comprehensive digital innovation platform. We connect entrepreneurs and emerging startups with access to vital resources, networks, and savings on essential business tools. We have over 25,000 global members, 140 mentors on the platform, and 450 investors in our investor forum. We're very excited today that we're going to be raffling off a free year of Passport, especially to members who participate in the questions. So make sure you're dropping your questions in, and we will announce the winner at the end of the session today. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Yao from Bubble. We're really excited to get to learn about building our MVP with no code. Thanks.
Thank you so much. Hi, everyone. My name is Yao, and I am so excited to be here with you today. I lead founder inclusion on the growth team at Bubble. Bubble is a visual programming tool to let you build basically anything with code, without code, sorry. And so I'm going to share my screen, and I'm just going to walk you through a little bit about me, my background, what Bubble is, and how you can use it. But I really want this to be interactive. And so I'll pause at different moments and ask the people who have questions or answer them. I really hope that that kind of ends up being the bulk of what we discuss today. So go ahead and share. All right, so we're all here to find out how you can build an MVP with no code, which is actually a journey I have very recently learned about. So before I get started, I'd like to just get an idea of what people are building or what you want to build or an idea that you're working on. So if you can just drop that in the chat, and then if anyone can just let me know what people are talking about, just so I can get a general idea. There's lots of different ways I can take this, but if you're building a marketplace or a social media platform or a CRM, I'd love to hear about it. So I'll pause for a moment, see if anybody has anything to add there. But I can always come back to it later. Let's see. We've got some social networks. We've got a booking application. That's exciting. Health and tech. Okay. Ooh, Mo's music. I love music. I'd love to hear more about that. Okay. Well, that's a good kind of all around representation, I think. And all of these things that you've listed can be built with Bubble. So let me just kind of dive in and walk you through what that's going to be like. So like I mentioned, my name is Yao. Before I joined Bubble, I actually was a non-technical founder myself. So I actually went to Princeton University and I graduated and worked at Bain & Company for a couple of years. While I was there, I've always been a very entrepreneurial person. I really wanted to kind of get my hands dirty and jump in and start a company. And I've always been really passionate about ideas of inclusion and specifically in the future of workspace. So I applied and got into the Antler Accelerator, which is basically this program that gets 100 smart people that the VC likes or wants to invest in. And they basically put us in a room and said, hey, pair up, start companies, pitch them to us, and we'll fund the ones that we like the most. So fortunately, that's where I met my co-founder, Christina, and we ended up founding the company Lemons. And what Lemons was meant to be was this new way to hire someone in digital marketing. What we were honestly really sad about is that specifically in the marketing industry and in general, if you're an underrepresented person, if you don't have 10 years of experience, it's very difficult to break into a new role. And so we wanted to kind of gamify that process and make it easier for more people to have access. So I founded this within the Antler Accelerator. And then I pitched it with Christina at the end, and we ended up getting the funding, about 150K of pre-seed funding to start our business. And so now we have the money, we have the idea, we need to build the product, right? So we went on and thought, okay, let's build this platform. What does it need to do? And our goal was to gamify hiring by allowing marketing applicants to basically participate in live hackathons so we could determine how good you are at marketing. And so our platform needed to be able to have different users on the platform, have them each upload their strategies, and for us to create duplicate landing pages so we can tabulate results. A great example is if the challenge is get as many signups on this email form as possible, we wanted to be able to track how many different signups came from each of the different founders, from each of the different applicants, and how can we track that on our end. And so we required user accounts, upload capabilities, and live tracking. And so neither of us really knew much about no code or anything. We were just kind of like, okay, well, how do we find a developer to do this? So we ended up hiring a developer, and they built this platform you can see on the left here. So as you can see, it says lemons in the top corner. It's got a little bit of copy in the middle. That center there is a countdown that lets you know when each new challenge is coming up. At the bottom are all of the past challenges. And in the top right corner, you can see there's a login. And so anyone could go in, click that login, and create their own user account. This took our developer 3 months to build, which all things considered was not too slow, but ended up costing us $3,500. And if we'd had years and years to put this together, it probably wouldn't have mattered very much. But we were in an accelerator, it was a crunch timeline. And in that 3 months, we weren't able to get a lot of feedback. So when we finally built what we needed, it wasn't quite what we were looking for. And it really inhibited us from being able to succeed within the program. So later on, my co-founder and I decided to not continue working on that project together. And so I left and I joined Bubble. Now, when I joined Bubble, as anyone who works at Bubble will tell you, you're asked to take a Bubble test to make sure that you're fluent in the platform. And so part of the test was I was asked to build a platform of my own. So I thought, okay, how hard would it be to build that platform that I just paid someone like $4,000 to build? So this is what I built on the left, as you can see. It's similar, right? It's got the same copy. It's got a countdown timer in the middle. It's got the past challenges on the bottom, and it's got a login in the top right corner. It's a little uglier, but it functionally does the exact same thing. And I built this in 30 minutes, and I spent $0 on it. And I talk about this just to say the basic functionality that I talked about, that I worked with that developer to do, that was so complex and we could do that whole back and forth, with a no-code platform like Bubble, because so much of this is built into the database, every Bubble app comes with a database, it comes with a login capability. Putting this together was not difficult for me, right? And so, it just speaks to the fact that engineering has kind of become this universal bottleneck where anything you want to do has to go through this arduous process of coding things. But so many of the problems in coding have basically been solved through, for marketplaces, CRMs, social media, especially. And so you can use no code to go faster and learn more. So don't be like me, build yourself a no code MVP. So I'll pause here. If anyone has questions and wants to drop them in the chat, or if anybody sees them, feel free to let me know. I'll give it about 5 seconds, and then we'll go into what you can actually build with Bubble. Okay, all right. I'm sure we'll have more questions at the end. I'll kind of move on just so we can make sure we leave time for that. So what can you build with Bubble? There's a lot of text, but basically you can build marketplaces, social networks, you can build automation tools, you can build CRMs. The one thing we have listed here is landing pages. People typically build landing pages in no-code apps such as Squarespace, Wix. You can do that in Bubble too, but to build that in Bubble is kind of like underselling the abilities that you can do with the actual platform, but you can build it in Bubble. But most people will build a marketplace, a social network, or some sort of automation tool or CRM. And to give some examples, Bubble, our actual website is actually built on Bubble. And within that website, we've got 2 marketplaces for boot camps. We host basically anything that we discuss or talk about. All of our media is hosted within the platform, that's hosted on the platform. We've also got Income, which is an invoicing platform. Good Gigs, also a gig marketplace. Not Real Twitter. This one actually, I think, went viral on the BBC. Basically, someone was like, can I duplicate Twitter? And they did, and it looks extremely, honestly, realistic. I highly encourage everyone to go to notrealtwitter.com. Dividend, solar panel financing platform. They've already processed $1 billion worth of business. And Coins is my personal favorite. One of the co-founders, Nate Washington, actually just raised another round and was honored by Google and got a grant for about $500,000 to build his business. They basically help people pay down their debts, and they are also built on Bubble. And then another slide, just not to beat the dead horse, but people have gone through Y Combinator, people have raised millions of dollars, people have had thousands and thousands of users on the platform. We've been around for I think we've been around for almost 8 or 9 years now. And so it's really exciting to see all the companies that come through. So you can also build any of these platforms here. I mentioned them not only because it's really cool that you could duplicate something. I believe someone in the chat mentioned they wanted to build Airbnb for ... You can. And what's really exciting about each of these specific platforms and why I chose them is that if you Google how to build Airbnb no code, we actually have how-to guides on the Bubble website that will tell you how to build each and every one of these platforms from scratch. I've gone through and done a few of the tutorials. Highly recommend, if you want to build something on Bubble, first think, well, what is it similar to? And you can look up that how-to guide and customize it to make your app look unique. So this is a moment where I kind of stop and I dive into the Bubble editor and I show you how to actually do the nuts and bolts of building a no-code prototype. So if there aren't any questions, and I'll do another 5-second pause, I'll kind of hop out of the presentation and hop into the Bubble editor and show you how I can actually make these things happen. So I'll give another 5 seconds or so for people to ask questions.
I have a question in the chat, but I can ask it like that.
Sure.
Talking.
Hi.
Hi, I'm Dina. I'm a founder of a marketplace, Be Local.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of an Airbnb, but it's different.
Okay.
And my question is, can we create a working MVP
Mm-hmm.
for the marketplace and have real customers? Because this is what my investors now looking for some traction. So I need to get some customers, real customers. Can we do that?
Yes, you can. And that's actually the whole point of what Bubble is about. As soon as you build your app on Bubble, it is publicly available for anyone to be able to see and access and use. Now you can set your own privacy roles to say no one can see anything I'm building as I'm building it. But if you say built your first page and you just wanted to test that out, you could go to your users, anyone, you could drop it into a community and say, hey, I built this part of my platform, would love for you to give me feedback, send them the link, and they can actually immediately drop into your Bubble app and interact with it the same way that you'd want them to, give you feedback, and you can iterate. So that's the whole core of what Bubble is that as soon as you built it, you can get feedback immediately.
And the other question is not clear to me because I joined 5 minutes late. How much do we subscribe to Bubble, or is it like, how much would that cost?
Sure. I'll go into a little bit of that towards the end of the presentation. We have different tiers that you can sign up for. There is the free tier. The main downside to the free tier is you're the only person who can edit your app. I think there's a Bubble watermark on it, but you can build as much into the free tier as you want. And when you feel comfortable upgrading, the next step up is about $30 a month. The step up from that is about $100 to $150 a month. And then once you've kind of scaled, you've got thousands of users, we basically work with companies individually to find out a rate that works for them. And it's usually somewhere in the hundreds of dollars range. So yeah, there's lots of different entry points for anyone who's interested.
And the last one we can answer now or later for everybody. So I don't want to ask more. Support, because I use I build sites, with Wix and all that, no good support. Is there any support when we are trying to develop something?
Yes. Yeah, I'm glad you asked. So we care a lot about our users at Bubble. Actually, the co-CEOs, Emmanuel and Josh, actually handled all support by themselves for the first 5 years of running the company. Today, support will get back to you. It's support@bubble.io. They'll get back to you within 2 or 3 hours if you requested them during business hours. And they'll give you a thoughtful response about how to do what you're working on. And beyond that, we also have an ecosystem of help. We have a forum you can post on. It's forum.bubble.io. There are about hundreds of posts per day. And if you post, there are lots of Bubble users who will hop in, give you feedback and help you answer your questions or help you build, even if you can't find it on Google. So there's lots of different ways to get help.
Thank you.
Of course, of course. Okay, so I think I want to make sure that I get through this next section. So I'll just kind of go ahead and go through that, but there'll be plenty of time, at least 20 or 30 minutes at the end, for me to answer each and every one of your questions. All right, so what I'm going to walk you through is kind of the quick and dirty version of building yourself a marketplace MVP. To define an MVP, for those who aren't familiar, it's a minimum viable product. I'm sure all of you have heard this term one way or another. But the main reason I discuss this is to say that what I'm going to show you today is a little bit ugly, but it's highly functional. And the reason I made it that way is because it is the minimum amount of effort I can put in so I can get the most learning from my customers. And to kind of hammer this home, I love this great graphic, which is the 2 ways not to build your product, right? If you were to build a car, you don't build all the different pieces until you have a car, because then you can't get feedback until you have the car built. You don't build different products that do completely different things and then end up with a car, because again, you don't get feedback until the car is built. You built that ugly struggle bus in the bottom left corner, and you keep iterating on it until it gets better over time. So with that, we're going to hop into the MVP that we're talking about today, which is Classio. It is a marketplace for students to find teachers in their area. I came up with this idea when I showed up to Bubble. It was mid-pandemic. I'd heard that people were organizing classes outside in their backyard for students. And I was like, oh, it'd be really cool if there was a way to find out, oh, is there a class happening in my neighborhood? How can I sign up for that? And so there are about 6 steps that I typically follow. And I'll preface this by saying everyone builds in Bubble a bit differently. But this is what helped me as someone who was non-technical and showed up to the company, really understand the building process. So the first step is determining which pages that you need. This sounds easy, but it's actually a little bit difficult to think about at first if you've never done this before. But again, the minimum number of pages you can get. You want to detail your required data infrastructure. This is probably the hardest part for those of us who haven't worked with databases before, and I'll go into that a little bit. Then you want to build your pages in and also put that data infrastructure into the Bubble app. And I'll show you it's very easy to do once you've made the table. And then you build your workflows. The workflows are what brings your app to life. It's what makes the app respond to user actions. And then finally, you can test it with real users, right? As I mentioned, as soon as you make your app, you can share it with users. So once you get through these processes, the key is to get feedback quickly and not build what you think users want, but build what you know users want because you got the feedback quickly. So step 1, determining which pages that you need. So for what I wanted to build, I realized there was 4 pages I absolutely had to have. The first one was kind of like a home page, like a landing page where someone could log in and enter the platform. The second was an onboarding page. So I just wanted to have a location where if I'm a student and I sign up, I can say, I'm in the 10th grade, I'm studying math, just get more information about the users. And same thing for the teachers that I'm connecting, get information about what subjects they teach, where they are. So I need that onboarding page. The third is a listings page. So you can think about this as a search, right? I want to type in, I'm looking for math classes for 10th graders, and then be able to see results on that page. And then finally, I need an account page where every single user on the platform can go, change their profile picture, sign up for stuff, just have that as a home. And so I've written down for myself, I just need these 4 pages and I can move on to the next step. And so the next step, and this is usually the biggest tripping point for people, is where you detail your data infrastructure. So to take a step back, Bubble thinks about data in basically 2 concepts. The first is the idea of a type, a data type, and then the second is the idea of a data field. And to show you what that basically means, it's like the data type is like the highest order, which is a user, right? There are lots of different users, but like user is the high order type. And anything that describes that user is a field. What is that user's email? What is that user's name? What is that user's profile picture? All of those things are fields tied to the user type. And so every Bubble app comes with the user type already built in. So I didn't have to do anything there for the email or password, but I wanted to go in and make sure I add the fields of name, location, and about me. Those are things I wanted to add into there. And secondly, I needed to add another type, which is class, right? Because each of these users is going to either create a class as a teacher or sign up for a class as a student. And so class is the type that I made. And then to describe that type, start time, like when does the class start? When does it end? What day is it? What location is it? What's the subject, et cetera? Those are all fields that describe that data type. And so what I encourage people to do the first time that they're building their Bubble apps is to draw this table, whether on a piece of paper or in a document online. That way you can understand, okay, this is how my data is structured and it relates to itself. And I'll show you in a bit how easy it is to actually put this into Bubble. So once you've created kind of your data types and you have an idea of that, then it's time to build out your pages into Bubble. And so I basically am just showing you the same table that I showed you before about the pages, except with the elements that I want to put onto the page. To define what an element is a button, an input form, a photo, anything that someone sees onto on the platform. Those are elements. And so I wrote some elements here, but it's much easier for me to just hop into the Bubble app and show you how this works. So we are going to hop into Classio, which is, as I mentioned before. And to orient you to what you're looking at, this is what it looks like inside the Bubble editor. So when you create your app, this is how you edit that app. On the top here, you can see the list of the pages that you have in the app. If you wanted to make a new page, you'd click add a new page. I've already made this app. So as you can see, the 4 pages I mentioned, index is kind of like the home page. Account, that's the account page. That's your onboarding page, and that's your listings page, right? All the way over here is the versions that you're working in. I'll go into a little bit more detail for that later, but the really important thing to get here is this preview button. As I mentioned, when you're building your app, it's already live. So if I click preview, it will show me what my app looks like from the user's perspective. And so when that loads, a user will see this Classio thing here and this sign up button. And I know that's what a user sees. And I can actually send this URL to anyone, and they can hop into the app and interact with it as a user would. On this left side here, I'll kind of start here and then move into the inside. You've got the design tab. So this is what feels close to a no-code platform you maybe are familiar with, your Wix, your Squarespace. The design tab has a number of elements that you can drag onto the page to bring your app to life. So if I wanted to drop a button, I would just click button, draw that button on there, call it button, I guess, that we click. Great, and then that button is there. And same thing, if I were to click preview, it would update. We could probably show you. When this is done loading, it'll update and you'll see this button here, right? So as you build, it can like auto updates your app. So we've got visual elements you can drag. We've also got groups, which is just ways of organizing your elements. And then here we've got input forms. So if I wanted to put in, just like any input for someone to type in their name, I can say type name here. And that's an input form that someone can use to update. For now, I'm going to remove it, and also this one. And then at the bottom, there are reusable elements, which are just elements you can standardize and put anywhere in your platform. On your workflow tab, this is what I mentioned before. It's what brings your app to life. And I'll kind of go over it a little bit back in the presentation, but this is where you create the actions using, I guess, if-then statements to tell the app what to do. Your data tab is what houses your database. So as I mentioned before, right, if you've drawn your data table and you know what your types and your fields are, you can create a new type. Here in this case, I made class, right? And then over here is where all your fields are. So I can create, say if I wanted to make another location field, I can create a new field. I can call it location 2. Create what the type is. In this case, a location is a geographic address. And then I can hit create. And now it's in the database. And that's all I have to do. And so if anybody creates a new class, they can then say, well, what do I want the location to be? And in my database, it will store and update that. So I'm going to delete this just because no sense in duplicating, but that's what the data tab is for. Your styles tab is how you can customize your Bubble app. So if I wanted all of my primary buttons to have the fonts, I can change my fonts here to anything that I want. I can also change the color and the background. This is where you make your app look unique. I'm not going to go too much into this because it's an MVP, but if I wanted to make it robust and pretty and interactive, this is where I would do those customizations. Plugins are kind of a huge powerhouse for Bubble. Emmanuel and Josh realized very early on that we can't build all the functionality, but if we can open it up for people to build their own plugins or connect their own APIs, you can expand the capabilities of your Bubble platform infinitely. So if you want to add a plugin, we actually have a whole plugin library here that you can check out. You can search for whatever you want, and then connect that plugin to your Bubble app, and it expands the capabilities of your Bubble app. And then finally, there's the settings tab. This is where you can do a number of things, upgrade your plan. You can work with your domain. And then finally, there's the logs tab, which is just anything that happens on the app is stored here. You can check your usage. You can check all of your other nerd facts. I don't spend too much time in here, but I know serious Bubble users definitely do that. So to go back to the MVP that we're building, the next step that I mentioned is dragging the elements onto the page. So I've already built this one, but a great example is my onboarding page. I just wanted to collect information. So I dragged a text element, which is one of these. I just typed in name, and then I said, okay, I'm going to put an input element here, say type your name here, and then did the same for all the different pieces of information I wanted, created a save responses button, and was like, all right, that's good enough. And then for the other pages, I did similarly. For listings, I kind of dropped my input element, and this is where I can get results. And for the account page, I decided to put a profile picture here, a button to edit your account info, a button to create a class. And then finally, there are headers and footers in any website that you want. And so I made sure that my header, I kind of custom made it to make sure anyone can access the My Account or Listings page through these buttons, and make sure that anyone can sign up or log in. And once you create your header here, you can just drag it onto any page that you want. So I actually drag this header here, right? And it's automatically there for whenever you want to access it. So coming back to what we're building, once you drag and drop those elements and you've created your header, now it's time to kind of type your data infrastructure into there. So I walked you through how you could do that. Similar to what I showed you, you can create new fields, create new user types, and then it's time to create your workflows within the app. And so this is another kind of foundational Bubble concept to understand. When Bubble thinks about workflows, it thinks about it in terms of events and actions. So an event is something that happens on the website. Say a user clicks a button, that's an event. Or a user scrolls to the bottom of the page, that's an event. An action is what the platform takes in response to that event that happened. So in the case of a button that takes me to a new page, if I click that button, that's my event, user clicks button. The action I can program is take me to a new page. And I'll show you like how I can make that happen. If I wanted to, on my index page, create a button that says, take me to my account page. I could click this button, draw it here, call it, take me to account page. And then I can click start edit workflow. And that takes me to this here. So as you can see, it already knows that the event in this case is take me to the account page is clicked. So I click here to add an action. I can go to navigation and say, go to page. And the destination page, because I want to go to the account page, is account. Click out and I'm done. And when I go to preview, this might not work because I'm not logged in, but hopefully this will, you'll get the idea. I can click this account page and it will take me to my account, right? None of the information is here because I haven't told my platform which user I am, but I've now created the action using that workflow. And when you're done, you can now start testing out your web app with real users. As I mentioned, right, I could send you this link now. You could go in, click around, tell me, yeah, this is really ugly. I want the background to be different. I can say, great, well, how's the functionality? You could say, I like it. I could be like, fantastic. And then I can go in and say, well, okay, if it's really ugly, maybe I should make this background a different color. So I can call it a flat color and maybe I'll make it red. And boom, now my background is red. And I can say, does this red ugly background make more sense to you or less sense to you? And I can keep getting that feedback from my users. And from there, you can kind of share with people and navigate the user. I've made this fake user Bill here with a photo and classes that Bill can attend. And you can kind of use that to keep getting your user feedback. And then once your MVP is done, it's just about iteration based off of what you hear from people. So that's an idea of how you go from nothing to now I have a platform, I built it, it's ugly, I can start getting the feedback, and you keep working from there. So I'll just give maybe 2 minutes on how to get started, and then I'm happy to open it up for questions. What I recommend is if you go to the Bubble website, we have lessons that teach you a lot of what I've been talking about today, but in more depth. There's also the Academy, which has video lessons that are actually really innovative and great, and we'll show you how to do these things. There's the manual for the nerds who want to read it, and then there's also boot camps that we offer if you want some more guided instruction. And then you can just start building. I honestly think the best way to learn is to just dive in. So I recommend that you would all do that. And with that, oh, I mentioned the forum before, great place to ask for help. The Bubble debugger, I didn't really show in the platform, but I can do it if people want to see it. Is a really great way to understand what's going wrong. You can book a coaching hour in our coaching marketplace, or you can reach out to the support team at support@bubble.io. Yeah, and so with that, I'll pause and thank you so much for having me. This is the end of the me talking at you part, and I'm really excited to answer your questions and hear what you're all working on. Thank you.
Hi, this is Malika. I have a question about how compatible will this app be with being able to deploy it on iOS or Android?
Right, so currently what Bubble does really well is web apps, which you can access on any web browser. You can turn your web app into a mobile app using a wrapper, but that either requires you to code it yourself or for you to hire someone to do it. We've had people do this. We actually have a program called the Immerse Accelerator for BIPOC founders. And our winner of the demo day last year actually has a native mobile app in the App Store. And what she did is she built it in Bubble, hired someone to wrap it for her, and now it's in the App Store and you can download it. But it doesn't necessarily happen all within the Bubble app. However, once you wrap it and put it into iOS or Android, you can continue to update your app in the Bubble editor. It's just the process of wrapping it for the native platforms that kind of happens outside of Bubble.
Okay. And so if I do use a wrapper, do you do some kind of quality check with it to make sure that it doesn't break something, works with everything that you are delivering?
Yeah, so that piece I think would be up to the developer or you if you decided to code it yourself. We don't necessarily have much say over how that process works because, like I said, Bubble is really for web apps, and that's where we kind of thrive. So I would say that's up to you to make sure that the person that you're working with really understands what they're doing. But like I said, if they do it correctly, every update you make on your Bubble app on the Bubble platform will also translate to the app.
And I think someone else in the chat has asked something similar about whose IP is the development.
Sure. So Bubble doesn't own your app. We just kind of own the Bubble platform. So any of the data that you have, I think I actually might have a slide on this if I look. Yep, here it is. So you own your application's design and workflows and the data, right? We just own the engine that runs your application. And all of the data stored in a Bubble app is housed on our Bubble AWS servers that we have very secure. We've never had any serious like data breaches or anything to date. But we also have protocols set up on the off chance that anything like that would happen. And then what I will mention is most important is because Bubble is so open-ended, you can create your own privacy policy and decide for every piece of data or information within your platform, who has access to that and which permissions pertain to that. And so we encourage you to create a really sustainable privacy policy and implement it yourself. Because in any cases we've ever seen where something happens with data integrity on the platform, it's usually because someone didn't set up a good enough privacy policy. So to answer, we don't own your IP or anything. We just own the Bubble platform. You own everything that is in your app, and it's up to you to make sure that you keep that secure.
Thank you.
Hi, here's Laura, and I have a question that I see a couple of people are asking as well in the chat. And
Sure.
It's about what happens when we need to grow beyond the functionalities that we find in Bubble. Maybe we need something more complex that we find ourselves needing, maybe some coding or, you know, some expanded capabilities. Is there any way to actually move into doing coding or export it, or, you know, if we get to a point that we want to, you know, it needs to be bigger or more complex, do we have to start all over outside Bubble, or is there, you know, any way to transfer what we already built into Bubble and expand it?
Yeah, so what I'll say is you actually will never really need to move your app off of Bubble unless you choose that you need to do that. The only things Bubble doesn't currently do well is if you want to do like a deep machine learning neural net, that's difficult to do native within your Bubble platform. If you wanted to build anything complex with blockchain, right, that's something that's difficult to do in the Bubble platform. And in those cases, I would recommend not necessarily building all of the functionality into Bubble and to, you know, pursue a coded option. If it doesn't fall into any of those two boxes, it can be built in Bubble and it can scale on Bubble as well. Like I mentioned, we have companies with thousands of users that raise, you know, millions of dollars, and have hundreds of thousands of dollars that flow through their platforms each day. So we don't actually find that people get big enough that they can't stay on us anymore. It's usually a question of getting creative with your functionality, using plugins, using APIs, and making sure that the way you set up your app is sustainable and doesn't create latency problems for your users. If you get to a point where you're like, oh, I don't want to continue doing this on Bubble, we don't necessarily have a really easy way to export it, but because you've programmed it yourself, getting someone else to code the same platform is actually much easier because they can see a very high fidelity prototype in your Bubble app. And that saves you a lot of back and forth time in the product management process of building the coded platform. So to kind of summarize, you will never need to move it off of Bubble unless it's, again, a deep blockchain or a deep neural net type application. But should you choose to, you know, there are ways that you can navigate that. but it's not as easy as copy and paste.
Got it. And is there any way that you can switch into actual coding, or is always like we saw beautiful no coding?
Yeah, I mean, most of the plugins that people build are coded. So the way that I would say to do that is, if you have that capability, you can have someone code a plugin. I think it's written in JavaScript, and then connect that plugin to your Bubble app. Now your Bubble app has a coded plugin, but it's still a no-code platform because the way that you interact with it is without code, but that plugin has code in it. So that's usually how people kind of integrate code and no code into their Bubble apps.
Perfect, thanks.
Of course. If anyone wants to, hop in and ask a question, otherwise I can kind of scroll through chat and answer questions as I see them.
Yeah, thank you for the presentation, Santosh. Just a question, particularly for the healthcare industry. Mm-hmm. One of the requirements is HIPAA compliance, etc. Would you be able to comment on that?
Sure. So currently, Bubble apps are not HIPAA compliant. We are working on that this year, and we might have changes to our policies at the end of the year. But currently, it's not so, and a lot of it is just because of how open we make the platform. Because you can decide your privacy roles and you can decide who gets to see what data, HIPAA requires you to basically make it such that you as the admin can't see certain things in your platform. And because of the way that we've designed it, that's not currently a feature. And so what we're trying to do is explore ways to create the Bubble experience where we can make it HIPAA compliant, but currently it's not HIPAA compliant.
All right, thank you.
Of course. I think I'll take a question from the chat. Let's see. Can we implement AI? That's a good question. So as I mentioned, you can't build a neural net in Bubble, but what you can do is connect an API to your Bubble platform that uses AI. So as the user, if I'm navigating with your if I'm in your platform, I could see AI capabilities within the platform and not know that it's actually happening through calls to an external API or through a plugin that you found that does the AI for you. So there's ways, it's just a little bit kind of circumventing it. Let's see. Oh, someone asked how they can connect to me. It's my name at bubble.io. I'm very, very responsive over email, and I'll actually drop my email in the chat if anybody wants to see it. I get through all my emails in 2 days, so please feel free to reach out. I'm more than happy to answer any questions that you didn't feel comfortable asking or didn't get to within this forum. And I see someone asked if they can connect Stripe or another plugin. Yes, you can. Stripe is one of the most popular plugins that we have within the Bubble ecosystem. Most apps that exist on Bubble charge their customers through Stripe. And so you can do that. There are also other alternatives, but Stripe is very popular. And that's, again, how you make most of your money within the platform. Anyone want to hop in and ask a question? Otherwise, I can kind of keep going through the chat.
Yeah, to that point, the payment feature
Sure.
for an app which requires like those like payment stuff, do you charge extra on top of the payment processing fees?
I don't believe that Bubble does anything about that. I think that most of the processing fees you will see will be through whatever provider that you're working with. I'm not 100% certain of that, but I haven't heard of that being the case. But feel free to follow up with me. I can go check it out and get you more updated answers.
Sounds good.
Of course. I see more. Oh, sorry. Does someone want to hop in? Otherwise, I'll go back to the chat. Okay. So I see more questions about compliance. Other than HIPAA compliance, you can basically be compliant to anything else you're looking for. It's just a matter of what the policies are. What we find is some enterprises don't like, again, the fact that the admin of the app can see anything within the app. And so maybe that doesn't qualify. But as I said, you make your own privacy policy. So if you create a privacy policy that satisfies whatever mandates you're trying to qualify for, then you're in the clear. And so, yeah, like I said, Bubble's open-ended. You can build whatever you want. It also means you have complete control over how people interact within your app. So it's hard to answer generally. It's very, very case specific. And if you have a situation where you've built your app and you're trying to make it meet certain guidelines, support at bubble.io is a great resource. You can tell them, hey, I'm in this situation, what do I do? And they'll work with you again and get back to you very quickly to make sure that we can help you get there or let you know what other steps you can take.
Hi, my name is Asia. I have a question. My
Sure.
startup is Mo's, Evolve Your State Through Music, and I feel myself trying to make something complex and like trying to have co-founders, etc. How do I simplify my process, like my brain process, to make it be like, okay, I want to evolve people's state through music. So what do you like to listen to during certain moods? Like, how can I just simplify that so I can have an MVP? Because there are some accelerators I want to join, but they're like, hey, you need an MVP. And I'm just like, I just feel like I'm overcomplicating it like so much. So do you have any advice for me?
Sure. I guess before I'll take this moment to plug the Bubble Pre Accelerator for Black, Indigenous, and founders of color. That's basically what we do. We take this year, or this semester, this quarter, I guess, we're taking 16 founders who come in with ideas, they need an MVP and don't have one. We help them build that MVP, we connect them to the tech ecosystem, and we also prepare them for the accelerator interviews that they're looking for. Related to what you're mentioning as far as simplifying, I can send you some resources about how to think about this. What I usually think is a very helpful metric is to like distill it down to one thing that you absolutely need to do that matches a specific customer problem. And then only build that one feature is usually a great place to start. And then just keep working up to the complex version that you want. And working backwards from customer interviews is also really easy because what you'll find is they'll tell you what to build. So then you can build that only, that becomes your MVP, and you create an iterative cycle. And that takes you out of your own head of trying to figure out what to do. Just ask the users, ask the customers, what are you looking for? Like, what would you want it to do? And build exactly that. But again, highly recommend applying for the Immerse program. This cohort's application deadline is on Friday, but we also are running a cohort every quarter. So there will be another one in the spring. And it's great. It kind of solves that problem that you're asking about. And again, follow up with me if you still have questions about how to distill your thoughts into an MVP. I spend all day working with Immerse founders, figuring that out for them. So more than happy to make time for you.
Thank you. And were you in Atlanta in December for a bubble thing with Nate Washington?
Oh, I was not in Atlanta, but I may have been kind of tangentially involved with a thing with Nate Washington. Nate and I are working very closely. He's part of what inspired me to build the Immerse program. So
yeah, I meant December 2019. I'm sorry.
Oh,
Yeah,
no worries, no worries.
of course you wouldn't be in Atlanta last year.
Yeah.
But yeah, I definitely add you on LinkedIn.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I can drop my LinkedIn link as well.
Thank you.
Of course.
I have a question. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Yeah, so first, are these MVPs database backed? Like, can we build the MVC that's required to store information and retrieve it from the database?
Yes, so what I was trying to explain earlier is that your database comes with your Bubble app. So you don't have to do any setup other than telling the database what are your types and what are your fields. And once you've written that into your database, anytime you store information, say I create a workflow that says on my onboarding, when I type in my name and say this is my name and click save responses, I can tell my app, go into the database for this user and their field name, update it with what they've just typed in, right? That's kind of how you work with your database. But again, it's there as soon as your app is made. You don't have to do any building. You just have to tell the database how to read information.
Yeah, and another question, because I did some research of no-code application, and one of the blockers I have, they don't provide UI of the calendar, like the calendar you have it in the Google Calendar, for example. Do you guys, I know this is very technical specific question, but just in case you have idea, do you know if Bubble Early provide such a UI?
So there are two options you could do. One, you could try to build it yourself. It's doable, but it would take lots of time. What I would recommend you do is one of two things. You can either go find a template. So Bubble, it might be bubble.io/templates. But if you go on the Bubble website, we have a whole list of hundreds of templates that people have made, which are basically fully functional apps that you can either take. Some of them are free, some of them cost a few $100s, and it will come with all that UI and everything in it. And I'm sure you can find one that has the calendar UI that you're looking for. If you can't find it there's, again, within the plugin library that I mentioned, you can look through. There is definitely, I know this for a fact, many calendar plugins that you can do. And the plugins will also come with their own user interface as well. And so you can just embed that into your application. So there are many different ways you can do it. If you don't want to do it yourself, I highly recommend checking out the templates or checking out a plugin that you can connect to your app.
Yeah, thank you.
Of course.
Hey, Santosh, could you
Hi.
speak a bit about the product development future or plans for Bubble? If you could provide some insight on that, the areas that you're trying to focus on and the areas that you see active development in.
Yeah, so our engineering team is working really hard on a few things. The first thing is we're actually working on making our editor more intuitive for people. As I walked you through the editor as it exists now, we are trying to find ways to kind of move it around and make it easier for a new person to get up to speed with what everything does and where it is. So we're working on that. We're also constantly working on speed. So right now, if you go to a Bubble website, it'll probably be as fast as any coded website, as you'll see. But again, right, as you have thousands of users and all this different data moving within your application, sometimes you start to see speed drop off by a few milliseconds or something as people get bigger. And so our engineering team is constantly working on updates to make sure that that latency difference is completely marginal and you can't really tell. So I think those are the biggest things that we're working on from a product perspective. And from a growth perspective, we're working on inclusive programming like the Immerse program. We're building out more boot camps. The coaching marketplace that I mentioned is new. I think we just debuted it in the last month. What that allows you to do is basically find a Bubble instructor who's very capable and talented, and you can basically buy an hour, 2 hours, however much of their time as you want, and they can unblock you as you're building. For those of you who decide to dive in after this, I'm really excited for you. What you'll find is building on Bubble feels like flying and then hitting a wall, and then you fly over that wall, and then you hit another wall, and then you fly over that wall. And those walls are just things that exist that you don't quite know how to do. And so usually you can unblock yourself through the forum or through Googling, but if you just want someone to just like sit with you and be like, I'm going to unblock the next 6 walls for you, don't do these things, do these things, it's a really valuable resource for people to go check out. So we're working on a lot of things at Bubble. We're a small team. We're only, I think, 35 people. And we've only really been building the team for about 1.5 years, but we're hoping as we grow over the next few years, we'll eventually kind of build out more of those capabilities and make it more intuitive for people.
Thank you.
Of course.
Another question, since I joined lately, I'm not sure if it was already asked. What is currently the potential of Bubble application? Like, are they good for MVC, or they are also maybe, can we have them for production? What's the recommended usage of Bubble applications?
Sure. So what we find is, I guess there are a few different types of Bubble users. So some Bubble users will just use Bubble to do pet projects. Like, oh, I want to make a to-do app for my house, right? And so some people will build that and they'll build it on a hobby plan for free and it'll be really exciting for them. There are a number of Bubblers, usually I think it's about like a third or more, who are startup founders and they want to build their business. So they'll start their MVP on Bubble, and as their MVP gets more robust, they'll grow on Bubble, add more features, add more pages, add more functionality, and eventually have a robust Bubble app that they manage. And then there are some folks who use it for kind of enterprisey things, like they exist within a company and they want to make a process more efficient. And so they'll use Bubble to build some sort of automation and connect it to their existing company or their existing processes. You can use Bubble for any of these functions, whatever makes the most sense for you, or any other function you can imagine, but it has the capability to do any of those things. And there have been many before you who have tried to do it. So the real answer is it's completely up to you.
Thank you.
Of course.
Hi, my name is Aaron. I have a question for you. You mentioned earlier that you can schedule time with a coach or mentor who's worked on the platform. I was kind of curious how much that costs and where would you go to do that?
Sure. So let me find that link as you're speaking. I'll kind of drop that in there as well. But basically, the cost depends on the instructor that you hire. So every different instructor has a different rate, and they set their hourly rates. I think they sit anywhere from like 30, 40 bucks an hour to like over 100 bucks an hour, depending on how they've decided to price themselves. But yeah, so you would check that out, and let me just find the link for the coaching marketplace, and I will drop that into the chat as well.
That's good. And while you're looking at that, I know I think you kind of addressed this question a little bit earlier, but I'm about 5 weeks into building on Bubble, and I'm in the process of hiring a freelancer to kind of figure out some of the things that are more complex. I'm very familiar with the hitting the wall.
Right. Yeah. It's right. Okay. Good.
Trying to figure out how to start over again. But yeah. I'm kind of worried. I mean, I'm going to be putting a lot of time and resources into this. So I'm kind of I haven't seen anything like this yet, but I'm kind of worried I'm going to reach a point where something just isn't possible on Bubble. And like, I haven't run into it yet, that I'm a little, just like generally worried that I'm going to spend all this time developing on it and then realize like, oh, it can't do a core thing that I need it to do. Are you aware of anything like that? And I'm not talking about like, I'm not building anything AI related or neural net related or anything like that, but are there like limitations that we should be aware of that are not related to AI or neural net applications?
Not that I know of. And the reason I say that is because if you ever hit a point where you're like, oh, I don't know how to do this, someone's probably done it before. And you can find that person either through the forums or on Google or looking stuff up. And if you actually reach a point where you have a core functionality, it doesn't exist, honestly, kudos to you, because it's only happened for a few people in the last like 8 years. And that's great feedback for us, because then we're like, oh, here is this one very specific thing that we can't do. That's great. We'll add it to our product roadmap and see if we can build out that functionality. As a quick, anecdote, Josh and Emmanuel's first customer for Bubble like 8 years ago, half of the functionality that exists in Bubble, or maybe not half, but a portion, only exists because they were like, why can't it do this? And then Josh and Emmanuel were like, fine. And then they built it, and they were like, okay, but why can't it do this? And that's how Bubble started. So again, if you ever reach that, this is actually impossible, no one knows how to do this, then that's great. Let us know, and we'll make sure that we find a way to make that happen.
Gotcha.
All right. Anything else? I see a question here that says, do we take care of the API integration? So we don't necessarily do it, but we have the endpoints within your Bubble platform. And so if you just look up the API specifics for whatever API you're working with, you can just type that into your Bubble platform itself. But yeah, each API is different. So you're going to have to do that, research to figure out what you're actually typing in as far as information. And hopefully that answers that question there.
In the first free tier pricing, are there all the UI and other stuff available same as the paid one, or in the hobby one, like there is a limitation or of some functionality and capabilities?
Yeah, so everything I showed you exists in a hobby free plan app. And I know that because I built it on the hobby plan. So you can drag any element that you want. The functionality difference between the free tier and the paid tier is mostly around things like connecting a custom domain. So if you want your app to have a custom domain that doesn't have Bubble in it, or you don't want your app to have like a Bubble watermark, then that's usually why people will upgrade to the first paid tier. And then from there, I'll drop the pricing page so that you can check out all the different features that you get from the different paid plans. But yeah, you can build out your entire app basically on the free plan. But if you want to, actually make it robust and get lots of feedback, you're probably gonna have to upgrade. So let me just drop this in the chat as well. I think I have time for 1 or 2 more questions if people want to ask them. All right. So I see one question. I'll have this be my last one. Someone asked if I'm accessible or if I'm maxed out to talk with new people. I am very accessible. Please reach out to me and email me and I'll try to find time. It might not be like in the next week or two because I'm deep in immerse application season. But once I'm kind of past that, I love having 10, 15-minute chats with people who are looking to build or just doing interesting stuff in tech. It's the part of my job that I love the most. So please reach out.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Yao, for this awesome interactive webinar. Really appreciate everyone who participated as well. Just a couple notes to finish up today. I wanted to just remind everyone that if you are a One Valley Passport member, you can actually get $2,000 in Bubble credits for the first 6 months of being a Bubble user. So make sure to check that out on our perks page. And then finally, we wanted to congratulate Laura Rodriguez. You are the winner of our annual Passport subscription. So we'll get in touch with you after this event to help you redeem that. And then one other note, next week we have our pitch event of the month coming up, and it's going to be a spotlight on Boston-based startups. So hopefully everyone can join us. We will send out along the RSVP page for that as well. So thank you again very much, everyone, for participating, and we'll follow up with all the links, videos from today, slides, and Yao's contact information.
Great. Thank you so much for having me. This has been fantastic. Best of luck with everybody.